Hey everyone, what's up? What's happening? It's Joe, and we really don't have a lot to announce this week. So I'm just going to run through the usual stuff real quick, and then we can get right into the episode. How many fingers am I holding up? The Facebook group. It's the very original name of our Facebook discussion group where we discuss all things movie and media related. It's a pretty free-reign forum. Anybody's allowed to discuss almost anything they want. Plus, Mike and I like to read and reference a lot of our listeners' discussions on live episodes and reviews just like this one that you're listening to right now. So, check that out. We want to hear what you guys have to say. Also, consider supporting the podcast by buying some of our merch, which is all available at howmanyfingerspodcast.bigcartel.com. We've got t-shirts, stickers, and koozies. Check it out. Speaking of check it out, I've said it a lot in this intro. You can check it out. Solo, a Star Wars story. We're reviewing it next week, next Thursday. I think it's June 7th, 2018 is when that episode comes out. But for right now, let's get to the episode at hand. We're very excited to review Jason Reitman's new film, Tully. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Mike.
And I'm Joe.
And you're listening to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, the podcast. And this week, we're reviewing Tully.
The Miracle on the Hudson.
Well, welcome to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, featuring two guys getting sauced and reviewing movies in a weekly podcast form.
And that came to us from Hayden Samak on Facebook. Check out last week's episode where we review.
Worked out coincidentally where that synonym that he threw in there weeks and weeks ago, and he just happened to be our guest last week.
Yeah.
So check that out on our review of Deadpool 2.
Which we'll record after this.
Yes.
Time is a construct.
It might be an alright episode. We'll see. Hopefully we record it after this.
Yes. Hopefully he doesn't die in a tragic car wreck. No, just...
Rest in peace, Hayden.
We're going to feel terrible if that actually happens. Hey, check out Deadfellow on Facebook.
In memoriam. But this week we are drinking... What are we drinking? Because I just bought it today. Grateful White from our good old friends at Rivertown Brewing Company. They're the ones that made the Hala Kahiki. Oh, I didn't even think about the fact that we did that for Deadpool.
Yeah.
It's all coming full circle a week later.
I've been doing this podcast too long. Yeah. I feel like we've done a few.
It's a Belgian wit. Yeah, I always see them when I'm searching in the liquor stores around you. Mm-hmm. I don't really see them by me as much.
I think they're based in like Pittsburgh, but it's a PA beer.
It's a malt beverage with spices added. Crack this bad boy open.
Grateful White.
Ooh.
And the can, I love like their can art. It's obviously a play on Grateful Dead. Maybe, maybe you guys could have made like a Irish red ale, and it could have been Grateful Red. Come on, guys, come on! Bad boy's fizzing. It's good.
It's all right.
It's a
little bit of a fruity afterbirth in there somewhere.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I just don't think I like white ales or whatever. Is this a white ale? Is that what the play?
It was racist against white ales.
Yeah. That makes sense. I was trying to think of something funny to say back, but instead, you guys are just going to have to live with, yeah.
You got me.
Oh, boy.
I do just want to apologize in advance. Getting over a sickness as we're recording this.
Mike, what the fuck, man?
We were actually supposed to record last night. I was not in good shape yesterday. I'm a little bit better today, but I'm probably going to cough at some point, and it's going to be awful on your eardrums. So I do apologize. I'll do my best to keep it away from the mic. But yes, we're reviewing Tully this week. Joe, you want to hit me with that IMDb description? I'll give you some mic notes, and we'll hop right in.
I would love to.
Do the damn thing.
A mother of 3 hires a night nanny to help with her newborn.
Nice and sweet.
Yeah.
There's a lot more that goes on here, but we'll get into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me about Jason Reitman. What's his deal?
He's a director. He's previously directed Thank You for Smoking, Juno, Up in the Air, Young Adult, Labor Day, Men, Women, and Children, and the upcoming The Frontrunner, and The Adventures of Beagle, the Unimaginary Friend, which is a very unfortunate title for an animated movie.
Yeah.
It just does not roll off the tongue like you would want it to.
Yeah.
The Adventures of Beagle, the Unimaginary Friend.
I'm kind of surprised he's still, like, I'm surprised he has 2 upcoming films.
Mm-hmm.
I love Jason Reitman. I'm always kind of in his corner. But I do think his career has kind of... I feel like he came out with Thank You for Smoking, which is one of my favorite films, and it's, like, really great, but I feel like he's kind of been backsliding ever since. That's just my opinion.
I don't know if critically that's true, because like Up in the Air was nominated for like a butt ton of awards.
I think
Young
Juno's
Adult
like,
even was nominated for a bunch.
I think Juno's his crown jewel. Though. Both, Juno's a household name. I think that was up for a ton of Oscars. That was the Best Picture nominee, and that just got a lot of buzz. That's like a cultural touchstone, definitely. Juno. Yeah. I've seen all of those except for Labor Day, which.
I've seen the first 4. I haven't seen Labor Day or Men, Women, and Children.
Yeah, Labor Day, it just looked fucking goofy and really off-brand for Jason Reitman. It was like this really melodramatic thing.
Just from the title, it sounds like one of those ones where they throw like 30 different like A-list actors in there, and they're all in there for a scene. Like, was that one like New Year's Eve or something? Mm-hmm.
That's a hot ticket. Or even just... movies named after holidays.
Yeah.
Every time I turn on...
And they time them for the release of the holiday.
Every time I turn on the Fire Stick, it's like, do you want to watch Mother's Day? Because it's Mother's Day? And it's just like a bunch of... I don't know. But no, Labor Day looked like it looked like The Notebook, practically, kind of. Which it was like very strange.
Who's in it?
And I'm pretty sure Josh Brolin, I'm pretty sure. And I don't know whether I'm making this up, but it seemed like a period piece romance or something. And then I've never seen Men, Women, and Children. I've watched like excerpts on YouTube, but I've heard it's like a hilariously bad like Black Mirror episode. But the cast is so stacked. Have you looked at that cast? It's like... It
sounds familiar, the name of the movie.
It has Adam Sandler or whatever in it, but it's also got like Timothy Chalamet from like before. That was like, I think that was his first kind of thing that he was doing. Mm-hmm. And then... Baby Driver,
Ansel Elgort,
and then like Judy Greer, and it's this really stacked cast for like what looks like a really bad movie. So yeah, I know a lot of those movies didn't do well. Starting with Young Adult, I don't think Young Adult performed well, and I think Labor Day and Men, Women, and Children performed even worse.
Although I think wasn't Young Adult nominated at the Oscars?
I don't think so.
I'm gonna look it up.
Check it out. Check it out.
Because I feel like that's why I watched it.
But still, I remember we watched. Or did you see it at the Montclair Theater?
She was probably nominated. Theron earned a Golden Globe nomination for her performance, so she was probably a hopeful that whole year.
Oh, okay.
Did I see Young Adult in theaters or?
And I just remember, I think it was when Sabri and I first started dating. We were living in Bloomfield, and I saw it at like the Montclair Theater. Like a specific. Did you come with us, or did you see it there too?
I think I might have illegally streamed it.
Oh, okay, yeah. I just remember seeing it in theaters and being a little disappointed. I wasn't crazy about it, but we'll talk more about that just because. I mean, it is. I mean, that was written by Diablo Cody, and so was Juno or whatever.
Kind of stealing my thunder there for my next mic note there.
Sorry.
And just obviously Jason Reitman, obviously the son of Ivan Reitman, the director. And
I wonder how he got into the industry. Am I right? Am I right, ladies and gentlemen?
Fucking nepotism. Tully was written by Diablo Cody, who has previously written Juno, Jennifer's Body, Young Adult, Paradise, Ricky and the Flash, excuse me, and the upcoming Sweet Valley High and Time and a Half. She also created United States of Terror for television, created One Mississippi, and created the upcoming Alex and Amy and Prodigy. Those are 2 separate series that she's created. So I didn't know she did that much work on television.
I knew United States of Terror. I didn't know was she the showrunner for, or
she created One Mississippi too. She created everything that I listed there. She was a creator for.
Would have been like the.
Maybe she's a writer on the show. And maybe, I don't know if Diablo Cody's the showrunner on the show.
Oh, okay.
She created One Mississippi.
What is the difference between created and show running? Is it just pitching it? Or?
I don't know. I mean, like, yeah, maybe creating is just like it's her idea. Because you can show run a show after someone else has created it.
Right, that's true.
You know, like they did that with Mad Men. They brought in other people and Sopranos and whatnot.
Yeah, that's true.
But she initially became known for her memoir, Candy Girl, A Year in the Life of an Unlikely Stripper, which I didn't know this until reading this. I thought that she was like an actual stripper that became a screenwriter. I didn't realize that she was like an aspiring screenwriter who was doing the stripping thing as kind of like let me write a book about stripping.
Oh, that's fucking lame.
Right? Like I feel like when Juno came out, it was sold to us as like, like this like rags to riches story.
Oh, definitely,
of, like, she's stripping and selling her body, and now she's, a Hollywood, screenwriter. When it was really just kind of like, I mean, I'm sure she's, still coming from some sort of rags.
Right.
If she's resorting to doing that for, a book and a blog and an essay, I think it was too. But it was, definitely a little bit different than it was pitched during the whole Juno craze going on.
Right.
Because that was all anyone could talk about is, Diablo Cody's a stripper!
Yeah, no, I know. And that was
Can you believe it?
That was really her PR push, kind of. Again, and it was sold to us as this white trash kind of rags to riches. And, I mean, we all ate it up. And, that's a little disappointing. I don't know. It's hard. I imagine it's such a nuanced situation that it's hard to really totally grasp, like, what's what. But that makes a little more sense. Was she from? Did Reitman get Juno off like Blacklist, or what is that thing? Is that what that is called? Blacklist or whatever.
I didn't do enough homework, Joe.
It's fine. I think it was.
Excuse me.
That's interesting, though. I didn't know that.
Tully stars Charlize Theron, Mackenzie Davis, Mark Duplass, Ron Livingston, and a bunch of kids. And then just the only kind of interesting note about production was that Theron said she gained nearly 50 pounds for the role in a period of 3.5 months and ate around the clock to keep the weight on. It took her 1.5 years to take the weight off after filming had wrapped. So some pretty intense weight gain going on there.
Wow, yeah. I heard it was 30, so that's even crazier.
Yeah.
Especially because I think she was doing this like right after Atomic Blonde, which she is fucking fit for that movie. So that's really...
Oh, after Atomic Blonde?
Yeah. So that's like... I don't know how she did that. That's super impressive. But yeah, let's talk about Tully.
Talking Tully, the podcast.
Talking Tully. What did you think going into I kind of was... The trailers were a little underwhelming for this, just because... This movie's a character study. Until it's not a character study. It's really not plot forward.
Yeah, I should say that we are going to have a spoiler warning at some point in this movie, because there are some heavy spoilers.
This does not seem like the movie that would require a spoiler warning, but it does. It's I don't know. It's a character study that's only later a story because there's like an ending on it. I don't know. I don't want to give my opinions on that yet, or where I was going with that yet, but I can see this as a hard film to market. All trailers were just kind of montages of mom life, and then a lot of the trailers would just end with like, I'm Tully, I'm here to take care of you. Kind of. So like I really had no idea what this was going to be like.
I was kind of excited going into it just because I hadn't really been keeping up, I guess, with Jason Reitman. I didn't realize that he did Labor Day and Men, Women, and Children. So like the last movie I remembered from him was Young Adult, which we have differing opinions on, but I really liked. And then I obviously liked Up in the Air, Juno, and Thank You for Smoking. So I'm like, oh man, he's like on a roll. His next movie is going to be great. He's teaming up with Charlize Theron again. It's got Diablo Cody in it. Like it just seems like a winning formula. So I was kind of excited going in, and I think the trailer is pretty well cut in terms of it. It is like a mom montage kind of thing, but it has that kind of like magical turn at the end where Tully shows up like, "Hi, like I'm here to help you,
right,
or here to take care of you." She says. And it literally seems like it's going to be like Mary Poppins showing up and figuring everything out for her.
Yeah, and again, it is hard to market. It's like, how do you? Again, like there is a spoiler alert, so it's. And it happens very late in the movie, but I don't know. Yeah, it's just a confusing movie to market, which I don't think this movie also didn't do that well at the box office.
Yeah, no. I think they were saying like, oh, if it made like 8 million, that would be like a good like opening 2 weekends or whatever. And I think it made like 5 combined between the 2 weekends.
I think
there
were
3 and 2, basically.
I wonder if that whole... I didn't read about it, so I don't want to comment too heavily on it. But I know there was like this kind of like moms with like postpartum depression against this movie. That was like a big thing in the news for a while. Sabri was telling me about it.
Yeah, I mean, I
don't know. But again, that's something I'll touch back on later, just because I feel like their comments are kind of spoilery for this movie.
I think also my expectations were lowered going into this. Because I had read a bunch of reviews that were like kind of describing it, and you can kind of get that feeling from the trailer that it's like a tired mom fantasy,
right?
Which kind of just makes it sound like it's going to be like a Facebook status you would see in your feed. That's like, oh, like that feeling when you want to trade your kid for a bottle of wine or something like that. Like it just seemed like something I wasn't going to be able to relate to. But I mean, I still like the creators of it, so I was interested from that aspect going in, and I was kind of pleasantly surprised, and like I think it is still a tired mom fantasy movie, but it's also much more than that, because I think that implies that it's going to be like cynical and sarcastic, and it's just going to be like kids are the worst, and I think it's much more effective at doing a lot of really quiet things, which like I didn't realize I had missed so much with all the blockbuster movies that we see. Like every once in a while you'll see like a well-made movie like this where you're just like, oh man, like they don't have to like spell out everything that's going on in this movie in the beginning, at least. Like I don't know, like I really like a lot of the sort of like motherhood montages that go on in this, and they get a lot across without having to spell everything out, and there's just a lot of like really quiet moments. Like it's not like if it was what I was expecting by tired mom fantasy, it would be like the mom, getting to have this big freak out and, getting this big justification for all this like anger and pain she's feeling. But it's like quiet, and it's just like it's Marlo like taking her shirt off after the kid has spilled juice on it and just like letting it go on the floor and just like,
oh, it's even like fucking milk,
yeah,
which is
or
fucking
like
gross,
or like Drew not waking up when the baby's crying in the middle of the night and Marlo does, or like when she has to go wait in the parking lot that's full because Jonah won't let her park in the parking lot that has spaces because of whatever's going on with Jonah at that time. So there's just a lot of like quiet moments where you can just like really feel the frustration, but it doesn't seem like it's like a pity party, like, oh, being a mom is so hard, which is what the tired mom fantasy description makes it sound like. But this makes it real. It makes it much more relatable. Like me, as someone who's not a parent, could watch this and be like, yeah, I'm not a mom, but I know that feeling of just being like, I'm just ready to give up on everything right now. Like it reminded me a lot of the season 4 finale of Silicon Valley, where there's a moment where like, without spoiling what happens in that episode, they basically have a whole operation going on in a truck, and they leave the door open and everything falls out the back of the truck. And they're just kind of looking down the street at like all this equipment like sprayed across the road. And there's just this kind of quiet moment of like, fuck, like we just spent all that time working on everything, and this is kind of the end result. And that's what this whole movie kind of feels like in a nice, relatable way, I feel like. Or I should say the first 2/3 of this movie.
I just keep cracking up. Like, I didn't know exactly what you meant by like tired, or like what you thought like tired mom fantasy meant or whatever. And then then when you were like I would trade my kid for like a bottle of wine. Like I almost pictured you picturing this movie as like bad teacher, but like bad parent. Like, you know, like Cameron Diaz, like bad teacher, like, I'm too hungover to teach class. Like,
it does kind of make it seem that way from the trailer, because there's a scene where she like drops the phone on her baby.
There's no other scene that's really like that.
There's like maybe one where like she's walking out of the office and with the baby carriage, and it like smacks, and she's like, he's fine.
Right. No, again, we are both without child, which, thank God. If anything makes me not want to have a child, it's this fucking movie. There are some very sweet parts of it, but again, like you were saying, I don't feel like super alienated. Like, this is like a pretty immediate, empathetic, and just like compelling movie. I don't know. And again, it was just kind of like to get more into it. I feel like this is kind of like a character study, so it's hard to go like beat by beat. So I just feel like maybe I'll talk about more broader themes, but just to revisit Diablo Cody. And again, that was such like I feel like Juno was nominated when we were at like the height of like movie interest, and that was up for like Best Picture during like a really great, was that like up with like There Will Be Blood, and like
that might have been, and Up in the Air was 2009, so it was probably 08 or 07.
No Country,
it's probably 07.
Yeah, it was. Okay, I remember me and somebody else watching like There Will Be Blood and Juno back to back, and
that was back when it was still 5 films too for Best Picture.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it was really, that was really something that was up for Best Picture. And it was a great film. And you know, like Diablo Cody, I guess she's known for this highly stylized dialogue that's not naturalistic, and it's the fucking home skillet problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, you know, like,
although I feel like I haven't really noticed it too much since Juno.
Yeah, I was about to say, like I said before, I wasn't a big fan of Young Adult, but both Young Adult and Juno, Young Adult has touches of this kind of home skillet. But they're both, I mean, and again, even if I don't like Young Adult as much as you do, like, you have to admit, they're both like just devastating films at times. And Diablo Cody's definitely talented. This film is also devastating in its own right, and this film features some of her best writing. She even makes like her quirky writing work, because it's through like this one character that shows up and is quirky and is kind of like this like modern kind of Mary Poppins kind of thing. I thought you were going to
say Jonah, because they keep referring to him as quirky in the movie.
That's a whole other thing. And there's, I don't know. There's so many like charming and naturalistic, like, again, like I said, she's not naturalistic. In this film, there's so many like charming and naturalistic like humans and families in this film. However, the end of this movie, I don't know what she was. We'll talk about that later. But you know, Diablo Cody manages to put some of her stylized like dialogue in the wrong places of this film, like when Marlo has like a meltdown in like the principal's office or whatever, and I don't know, she talks about like coming into the office to kiss her ass every day, but it's like, instead she writes something so much more vulgar, like Diablo Cody, where it's like, I come in here and like kiss your asshole or lick your asshole every day. And I was just like, oh, that's fucking gross. And it took me out of a very naturalistic kind of like devastating conversation, kind of about like a real fucking natural struggle. And I don't know, it felt too punched up and intentional for, like, Diablo Cody had to be like sitting there and be like, what's a more clever way I can say kiss your ass, kind of, like lick your asshole?
Or it was like she was trying to make a moment that was real feel funny.
Yes,
it's like,
exactly. That's not funny.
Sometimes you don't want to insert punchlines in those moments.
Right, yeah. And then there's...
Because people often aren't funny when they're being, you know, really angry about something.
There's also I loved that one dinner scene where they're over Mark Duplass and his wife's house. And I also hated it because like there's so much just like resentment, and they lay it on really thick. And there's even a part where Charlize Theron says like, quirky? Why do you keep saying quirky? He's not a ukulele. And I'm just kind of like, I don't know. And I also don't like that quirky thing. And like, it's a little confusing, that whole thing, because he obviously has some sort of like sensory issue. He's on the spectrum, and I don't know why, or I'm not really sure why this Charlize Theron, I feel like everybody's scared to say it, and I don't know why Charlize Theron can't. I really wish I had Sabri on this episode. Somebody else canceled, and then Sabri was just not prepared enough to come on. But she was talking about, like, if somebody has like a degree of autism and you're going to like one of these like religious schools, like legally they
Spilled water on my laptop.
legally they have to give you like an aid. They have to pay for the aid. But because they just keep saying he's quirky, like that's why
They haven't put
she
down.
has to, yeah. And it's so strange, like even like giving him that kind of like sensory kind of like brushing his skin. Like I was like, why has nobody diagnosed this? And like maybe it's just weird, or maybe there's something I missed where Charlize Theron is too proud and doesn't want to admit that he has something like that. It's just
That is a thing. Like I remember, I met this guy once, a very nice guy, and he had a son who had Down syndrome. It was a full diagnosis from the doctor. It was obviously very visible in the kid, and he didn't really want to admit that was going on. So like he's very proud of his son, so he'd be showing us pictures of his son and be like, like the doctor says he has like Down syndrome, but like, he's just as smart as all the other kids, and like I don't really see any evidence of him being, slow or held back in any way. And it was just this kind of like really sad moment of like,
that's not what Down syndrome
you don't
means,
want to accept it yet. And I understand that that's very hard. So I can understand maybe from a writer's perspective something similar going on where you just don't want to, if no one's going to say it, you don't want to be the first one to say it, like you want the doctor to be like, your kid's on the spectrum.
I wish there was something that was like a follow-up or some other detail in this story about that, because then otherwise it's just kind of weird. I don't know. It's just a kind of strange thing that's happening.
The dinner scene was kind of weird, I thought, because I thought they were like, it was just very obvious that they were trying to manufacture an awkward moment.
Yes.
And like sometimes movies are good at that, and then sometimes they like it's just so obviously a moment that wouldn't happen, and it's so obviously just like manicured and like like there's no way that like Mark Duplass's wife in this would say the thing. I can't remember exactly what she says that sets Charlize Theron off, but it like it sets the theater off, and you get that reaction, and that's not really what an awkward moment is. That's just someone being like a bitch.
Right.
And like an awkward moment would be like her saying something that could be taken another way and unintentional, and just kind of happening to walk into an awkward moment mistakenly. And Charlize Theron makes it awkward because she takes offense to what was said, and she didn't understand that it would be something that could be taken that way. But yeah, it just felt like, I can see like the writers like fingerprints here, like trying to make an awkward moment happen.
This movie's so strange. It's almost like Diablo Cody's writing for television and Jason Reitman's directing like a mumblecore movie. Like, like there's missed connections everywhere, kind of. It's not to say that I don't like this movie. I do love this movie, or at least the first 3/4 kind of it, and I think it's like a really fantastic film. But there are these just missed connections where I'm kind of like, her writing and his directing isn't matching up. And they're both really good at what they do. Whoever's editing this, whoever's cutting this movie is really great. There's so many like passages of time, like the like when Tully and Marlowe are driving to the city, kind of, and they kind of have this like, it's just like a series of snippets of songs, like as they're driving to New York from her
going
home
through all the different tolls and bridges,
and they're just, and it's just one CD of like Cyndi Lauper's like I don't know what that CD was called, like She's So Unusual or something, but it shows this passage of time, and it kind of also shows this kind of like, oh, this is how long it takes to get from like her life to like the fun part of her life, kind of.
Yeah, because like they were thinking, okay, let's just go to the city, and then it's like, oh, all right, now we have to sit in the car for like 2 hours to go into Manhattan, and then cross the other bridge to get into Brooklyn.
Right.
It was just the whole thing.
And then also like the birth of the third child, Mia, is like a really great. It's one of the best like birth scenes. I mean, there's so many just flat out like, like I thought Knocked Up kind of had like a really great birth scene where it's kind of like, she's like screaming and she's shitting herself or whatever, and that's funny and Apatow-esque. But like this is like the jump. I think I'm also just like a sucker for jump cuts and jumps in time. It trusts the audience and it's stylized and everything. And it's just like, it's cut of her water breaking. And then it's kind of like, all right, we're at the hospital and it's fucking like midnight and I'm just kind of scrolling through my phone to cut to like having the baby, to like cut to the baby and Drew sleeping and her kind of like waddling across the room in like a postpartum diaper kind of. Like that's what birth seemed like. Birth isn't just like, I'm having the baby and this is the only moment that exists in this like experience.
There's a whole before and after.
Yeah, and especially if you've been in the hospital at any time, it's just a lot of fucking weight. It is like just being in the hospital, looking at your phone like at midnight, kind of. It's
I also really like the montage of like raising Mia after she's born.
Oh yeah,
where it's just like the kind of the routine of like getting up, waking up, the baby's crying, feeding her, putting her back to bed, the whole thing. And like it gets to the point where like you start getting annoyed by the sound of the baby crying. Right. So like you're feeling for her. And then they would just throw like little things in there. So like they throw like presumably her mom or Mark Duplass's mom visiting, and like in between all this like baby crying, like grating noise, you just hear the mom like, oh, you're such a precious little angel. And then it cuts right back to like the baby crying. There's just a lot of like really effective stuff that's thrown in there. That's really nicely done.
Yeah.
I really have very few complaints with like the first half of what I thought this movie was.
Oh no,
before
same.
Things changed. Like
I
think maybe great, like I could do without the mermaid fantasies that are showing up in the first.
It's not even that. There's a whole weird nautical theme going on, and I thought that was gonna. Or I don't even.
It makes sense later in the movie, but I don't like where that part goes. So I don't like this.
I thought it was going to make more sense, or it was just kind of be this out there theme of kind of like, are you the like. Is that baby like the barnacle on you of whether you're a ship or a whale kind of, and the mermaid thing. I don't know. It was all, again, I would have been okay with it if it was just this kind of theme in the background and it didn't have to, I don't know.
Yeah.
I felt stupid at the end where I was just kind of like, this is a really beautifully done, again, it's the whole, I think after this, I'm just going to go into spoilers. But it was just...
I mean, I have a few more points we can get to.
That's fine. But yeah, eventually. But it's just kind of this whole thing where like Diablo Cody's planting these seeds the whole time that kind of make way for this thing at the end. But again, I think Jason Reitman is directing like this beautiful kind of indie film that shows this really raw human emotion at every turn. And I think Charlize Theron is on like Reitman's side, because like sometimes Diablo Cody's dialogue coming out of Charlize Theron's like mouth is like very strange, kind of. I don't know. It's just, again, with the disconnect.
Yeah, and like I think Charlize Theron is obviously very great in this.
Probably the best female performance, performance maybe that I've seen this year, but
so far, yeah, probably. I mean, I know some of it is makeup and, some of the weight that she gained, but she just looks so tired. And then there is this sort of transition that happens when Tully comes along and is able to, take some of the weight off of, caring for this child for her, and she's able to get more sleep. And again, part of this is makeup. Like she starts wearing makeup again, and she's starting to look brighter, and she's glowing again, and all that. But then just her performance too. Like in the beginning, she's just so dull and lifeless, and there's a part in the hospital when the baby's born and Mark Duplass is like, I just want my sister back. Like I feel like she's been stolen away from me for the past like 2 or 3 years.
That's some of the most heartbreaking stuff is Mark talking about kind of
Mark Duplass is bae.
He is bae.
He could just like take a small role like this in any movie and just like it just feels so real.
He loves movies like this. I mean, I'll talk about it later. There's just a similar movie that he did that has a twist like this, but it works for that movie because the theme of that movie worked a lot. But he yeah, I don't know. I mean, just his character in general he's kind of, they're so disconnected, just because of like their difference in wealth, but he is kind of like this gauge of like, oh no, I knew what you were like before, like this. Even like the husband is like disconnected kind of from Charlize Theron's character. Yeah, and there's something like even more devastating than like if the husband were to be like, are you okay, kind of, for him, like, you know, growing up as children, like, you're not the same person, like, kind of, and we even had like a shitty upbringing, like, and now you look even worse than that, like, what, like, I just want my sister back.
Yeah, so just like her like transition from the beginning of the movie to like the end of the movie is pretty impressive. So I do give her a lot of credit for that.
It's like a posture thing too, not even the weight.
You brought up a good point about there's that kind of like tension between like their financial status in that.
Yes.
I do kind of like a lot of the undertones about like class and privilege in this movie. Like, and there's nothing that really like beats you over the head. You know, it's hard to even pick out a lot of like specific examples. It's just kind of like a feeling in this movie of like life's a lot easier when you have money. And when you don't have money, it's just this kind of constant struggle. And, you know, like Drew could probably be a better father if he had more money and, you know, didn't have to work so hard and come home and, you know, take a load off with Call of Duty or whatever he's playing.
And I think that's his... Yeah. Drew is such an interesting character. Hats off to Ron Livingston, who I also kind of also feel bad for because I feel like he's in the same role over and over again. I feel like he was like this in like Sex and the City. That's a bad example, but like even like Office Space, kind of, which I think he's most known for. Like he's still playing this guy, but he's like this guy rebelling against the system, you know. And I'm not gonna lie, there was like a moment where I was like first watching this, and I was like, is that like a really lumpy Kyle Chandler kind of? I was like, my God, like Charlize put on 30 pounds, but Kyle Chandler looks like shit in this movie. No, but I just, a lot of people have called him kind of like just another podcast and reviews or whatever. Just like they keep referring to him as like a drip. Or I don't know, and like maybe I get offended because I see like some of myself in that character if I were to be in that position, and maybe one day I will, kind of. But I think there's more to it than that. I like thinking, like I'm okay with him thinking, like, you know, thinking I'm doing okay but not doing enough, kind of. I don't know. And he also has this look in his eyes that's kind of like, there's like a searching, wounded quality to him. I don't know how to put my finger exactly on it, but it's exactly like you said, where like he could be a better father maybe if he wasn't working so hard. And I think him working
he's
so
like
hard,
embarrassed about his status in life, and I think
him working
he wants
so
to
hard,
be somewhere better, and
thinks like him working so hard, he thinks that's him being a better parent and kind of like upholding, like, you know, maybe I can work toward like what your brother is doing. I don't know. I feel like there's even a bigger humiliation of kind of like your brother is like competing against the only other person in this nuclear married
and
family.
kind of like with Tully coming to the door and being like, I'm here to take care of you. I think this movie is less about like the after effects of parenthood. In other words, it's not about how the kids turn out. It's more about what does parenthood do to parents in this movie. So I think it has a lot to do, his character has a lot to do with like, you know, Tully being sort of so run down because, you know, it is sort of the realization he comes to towards the end of the movie. I don't think this is a spoiler, is him kind of being like, oh, I haven't really been paying attention to you, and I haven't been taking care of you the way I should have. And, you know, it's not just raising these kids. It's like we're supposed to be taking care of each other. And I did think there's this, we can probably maybe move into spoilers through this point, because like this was like my favorite movie of the year up until the big twist happens, where I was just like, it was just riding along so smoothly. I had very few complaints, and it was just like painting this really nice message that I really liked about this idea of like, it's kind of like the it takes a village sort of view of parenthood, where rather than it being like motherhood is so hard it's more like motherhood is hard because we've forced it into this like pigeonholed box of like almost like independent DIY motherhood, where it's like you have to raise these kids yourselves, and it's so the point of the movie feels to me in the beginning to be about like it's okay to accept help, and like kids were never meant to be raised alone. Like it's supposed to be a community raising children, and it's okay to ask for help, it's okay to accept help, and it's okay to lean on other people. And I thought that was like a really nice message that it was getting across just through the sort of turn in Charlize Theron, where like she's just so worn down. It's just like just a couple extra hours of sleep at night, and she ends up becoming a better mother by letting someone else take care of her kid.
And they even say, or there's like a really great line, and it sounds stupid and simplistic, but it was just kind of I don't know who she's talking to, but she's kind of like talking maybe she's talking to Tully about, is Jonah the son?
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, we went to 2 different doctors for Jonah or whatever, and one of them recommended this kind of brush therapy kind of to deal with like his sensory issues. And she was like, we didn't have enough money to go to a doctor for that, so we like looked it up how to do it on like YouTube
videos.
And again, that's very DIY kind of, and that's kind of like getting by. And I know that's like, it's so funny because that's such a thing of the time, and it's also like I know like my dad knows almost a wild amount of like just how to do things in a car, or like like fixing stuff, because he just looks at it on YouTube. He's like, I don't need a professional. I'll just look up like somebody's video of how to do it on YouTube. And that's such like a portrait of, I don't know, a certain characteristic of
it
people.
used to be like going to professionals or like asking your parents for help, or asking someone who knew. And now it's just like Google, and like, we can just Google or YouTube it, and
you are kind of crowdsourcing this kind of answer. I don't know if that's the right word, but again, they do need Tully. And
well, even if you can figure out like how to do things, like it's just in terms of manpower and time, like it is something that sort of takes a community of people. And I don't know if that hopefully that's not something that's like offensive to mothers.
No,
for me to say, to be like, oh, you need to be accepting.
Well, mothers are
more
people
help
too, and they need their their time, and they need their time and energy to be utilized into kind of like taking care of the child. It's just
because they do sort of start putting forth the idea that like they repeat it multiple times, like, and we're just gonna leave our daughter alone with this like stranger. And I think this movie is sort of starting to posit the idea that like it's less natural to physically suffer for the sake of parenting alone than it is to allow a stranger to help you like raise your child.
Is it returning to the roots of like human civilization, like you said? Like that's what that like idiom, like it takes a village, like that's what that's referring to, is when our kind of just tribes of people would take care of these children, so everybody was kind of getting their own. I don't know, let's stop beating around the bush. And I just want to say, spoiler alert, if you do want to watch this movie, I think what we're about to say might ruin this movie for you. So definitely pause it and come back to it. If you have like, it's you'll understand. We have complicated feelings about this movie, and we're about to reveal why. Han Solo dies.
It was really weird. He wasn't even in the first half of the movie, and then he just showed up.
And he dies.
And he was drunk driving, and he drove off a bridge.
It's so confusing how this, again, like I said, Diablo Cody planted her seeds, kind of, and she planted enough seeds to have an ending like this. But I was like, what's wrong with this just fucking being a character study? What's wrong with like there being a no ending to this, kind of? And instead, again, just kind of like the quirky dialogue. I feel like that's like this kind of reflex where it's kind of like, well, you can't, like this. Oh, well, this is a good screenplay because it's a little original.
I remember just taking a screenwriting course. It wasn't a very good teacher that I had for the course, but she did leave me with like one little nugget that I always took with me, where like I wrote a story where like Yeah, this is really embarrassing. It was an awful story. I didn't really take that class too seriously, unfortunately, because I didn't really like the teacher. But it was a story about like a guy.
There's so many classes in college where I'm like, I think I
reused a bunch of old work in it.
Oh, always.
But like the one original story I wrote was like a guy who his girlfriend decided to get an abortion and he didn't want her to get an abortion.
Right.
So he killed himself. And I remember her just having the note that was like, why does he have to kill himself? Like, why does it have to go this far? Like, why can't it just be about like the feeling surrounding a situation? Like you don't have to kill characters or go to these big melodramatic scenes just to end a story. Like sometimes the story can just be the feeling surrounding a situation. And that's kind of what I felt like.
Okay, can we pause it real quick?
Yeah, sure. All right, and we're back. I think I was just talking about my experience with that teacher in college, and that sounds like a weird segue. My hot and steamy experience with my teacher in college, who taught me so much about so little. But no, in Tully, just in terms of like it feels like it gets really melodramatic 3/4 of the way through, just as a way to like end this movie. Like
right. It does. It feels like a college student wrote the third act of this movie.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah.
And you can tell when they start ramping it up when like Tully walks into the house.
Yes.
And she's all like in a tiff about whatever.
The minute I got like a weird feeling in my stomach. And like even after the reveal, which, I mean, if you're not watching this movie and hopefully these two behind us aren't watching the movie. But in the third act, there's this big reveal that Tully is this psychotic projection, or this just it's fucking just Tyler Durden of Fight Club.
Fight Club for moms.
That's literally they literally even have a Fight Club scene where she's like, "Did I just?" And then it shows her like doing all these things without her, and like. I'm not going for it here. I didn't go for it in, like, it fucking ruined Mr. Robot for me. Like, yeah, and, like, it's just kind of like, do something else. It's already been done. It's a very iconic scene. It's one of the most iconic endings of all time. Don't do it. Especially in a genre that
really bothers me is that, like, there's another Ivan Reitman, Diablo Cody, Charlize Theron movie where the twist is like, oh, Charlize Theron is mentally unwell and is imagining things that aren't actually happening in her life. And that's how young adult basically ends in that movie is, you know, her imagining that, you know, she's sort of getting things back on track when really everyone is there for her just to, you know, because they feel sorry for her and they pity her. I
don't like that reveal either where they're like, maiden name? And he's like, Tully. And I was like, get over yourself. I don't know. It was just by that point in the movie, I was like totally. I don't know. I saw it with Sabri, and as we were driving back, she was like, "Well, no, I'm kind of like glad that happened because, like, or else that like strange sex scene would have." And I was like, I was okay with that. I was on board for that being kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little weird, but it didn't really bother me that scene being in there.
If Charlize Theron is okay with like. Kind of exciting her husband with like sex with like another woman, like I'm on board for that. Also, I saw somebody writing online calling it like Tully 2049 because that's the second time what is that actress's name?
Mackenzie Davis.
Yeah, because she plays the kind of the hologram that has sex with Ryan Gosling or whatever. Or no, she's the hooker that the hologram goes inside of in Blade Runner, and then and so she's like once again she's the
relationship fixer.
or just this weird surrogate for sex between a couple. Yeah, in a movie again, like less than a year away from each other. She's great though. I've heard she's really great in what is that AMC? Yes, *Halt and Catch Fire*. Which I have no interest in, but I'm glad people like it.
Is it still going?
No, I don't think so. All I know is that it looked like a really cool,
I guess
like,
it halted and
yes,
caught fire.
It looked like a really cool, like, oh man, we're hackers and it's a period piece and it's the 80s, baby. And then I saw like a preview for the second season. They're like, we gotta figure out how to make Pac-Man. And I was like, oh no, I'm way off board for this. Like, I was like, it somehow made it turn into like them inventing arcade games. And I was like, what is this?
Oh boy.
Yeah. I could be totally wrong. You can annihilate me in the comments. I've never seen that.
I don't think many other people have either.
Yeah, no, I think that's why it's not on anymore.
I just like it had this really nice message as it was like starting to wrap up, and then it just went for this like third act like
Fucking swan dive.
somersault. And like I just don't know what the message is to be gleaned from the end of this movie. Then like, is the message that like parenting will make you literally go insane?
The other thing is
do stupid things to like risk your life, like
exactly. And there's this. We're presented at the beginning because this is such like a humanist, naturalistic film that Charlize Theron's problems are multifaceted, and that they kind of just try to like wrap up one thing at the end because of this, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't. I don't know. I don't need endings to have like a clean kind of ironed, like it can be messy. Like that's what I wanted this to be. It's a character study.
And it's like
it
the
should
way
just
that
kind of cut out in the middle of
the way that the movie like does like the actual last scene of this movie. Like it's not like that couldn't have happened if we didn't do that whole like twist and reveal and whatnot. Like
right,
you could still sort of have like the sort of turnaround of like, you know, maybe we don't need the brush anymore.
Yes,
you know, and maybe it's just about like being close to your kids. And
that was such a beautiful conclusion too. Yeah,
but it's just kind of hurt by like this idea of like, oh, she like was like drunk driving and like went off a bridge like just like a couple months ago, and like we're not really seeing any of the consequences of that, like because she probably lost her license, like because
she kind of got like drunk in Bushwick by herself. Like it was so
that
confusing.
Starts making less sense.
And also yeah, now that we're in sort of these kind of like closing thoughts, one of my favorite scenes is this like karaoke scene of like it's like Mark Duplass's children's birthday or whatever, and they have like a karaoke machine, and they're doing like the Carly Rae Jepsen's like Call Me Maybe or whatever, and she talks like, I thought one of like the most heartbreaking things is that like, you know, like the girl doesn't have like great self-esteem, and she's very young, and like that's terrible to go into like a world like this, kind of like Charlize Theron says. And she's, you know, like there's even that small scene of like Ron Livingston kind of trying to do homework with her, and she's like, I'm too stupid for this, kind of. And then she has like a very like kind of like cute but just like very like shy karaoke, and then like Charlize Theron comes in, and then Mark Duplass is like, man, like she's really like different, kind of. And then Ron Livingston says like, yeah, we took you up on the night nanny thing. And then it's just a very strange scene for where the movie goes next. And I love that scene. Like I almost tear up at the kind of dumb like mother-daughter like karaoke moment. But then it's cut so strange. Okay, so we have Mark Duplass being like, I'm glad I have my sister back. And then we have Ron Livingston, who just exposed that kind of like information, and now he's staring at her in a different light.
He's like, yeah, it's kind of weird.
Yeah, and then he like looks at her for a while, and the camera just kind of stays on him, and then some dickhead behind me is like, he's afraid she's gonna leave him. And I was like, yeah, no, that's definitely what this film is trying to do. And maybe at some point it had like a different ending where like she goes back to that kind of like ex-girlfriend or something. Like it kind of even leans in that direction, but then it completely does like I'd be okay if this film did have something like melodramatic where she's like, I had a hookup with like an old fling, and I know we're married and yada yada yada, but like this has been all really hard on me, kind of. And it goes in such a completely different direction that I stopped caring about this movie kind of near the end. I don't know, it's weird.
Yeah, I mean, it could even be something like that, and then that's what brings them back together or something like that.
Right? Yeah. I don't know.
It's just a weird message, because then I feel like without that, the whole message ends up being like just that Drew is a bad father and it was his fault the entire
Yes,
time and he
yeah.
wasn't taken care of. And then that's
Which
why
I don't like
that's-
that drip thing. Like, I don't.
That's
like,
what I was saying before when I was like, people were describing this as like a tired mom fantasy, and like I didn't think it was accurate in the way that they meant it. But
Yes.
that is what the movie sort of ends up being. Is like, literally, it's a fantasy.
It's a literal
She's
tired
literally
mom
imagining
fantasy. Yes.
someone coming to like help her out, and it is this kind of like just kind of like put all the blame like on Drew. Like it's kind of sort of
Right.
Drew's fault, and like Drew is certainly part of has some blame to share as far as
Right.
everything is concerned here. But it just felt a little weird. It was a weird message. It didn't feel as like wholesome as what we thought the message was before this like Fight Club twist at the end of the movie.
It did. Yeah, I don't even know if wholesome's the right word. It's just, it's fucking stupid. It's fucking.
It made me mad
It's
because I
fucking like
really,
all my
I really,
like,
really liked it up until that twist, and then I was like, what are we doing here?
Right. No, it literally
You
sounds.
did this already. Other movies have done this already.
Yes.
And this movie did not ask for this and or need this.
No. This is not. It doesn't fit with the themes of the movie. It doesn't fit with like the aesthetic. It doesn't like. We haven't been set up for like it comes. It's such a twist that it hurts you like to twist that hard. Like
It does, because it's one of those twists where like sometimes like if a movie has a bad ending, you can be like, oh well, they just didn't know how to end it, but the first 3/4 of it were good. But this is the
Right.
type of twist ending that like invalidates how you felt about the
Exactly.
first 3/4 because it wasn't actually what you thought it was. So you're just like, all right, well, that like whole message about like it takes a village that I thought we were getting from this, and like
Yes.
the transformation of like Charlize Theron going from like tired mom to like being a mom who's actually taking care of stuff, like that seemed really nice, but that wasn't actually happening. She was just going mentally insane and imagining some crazy nanny helping her out.
It's kind of horrifying. If you look at the whole picture, I think the movie tries to be like, hey, and I think it's all gonna be all right. And you're like, no, it's definitely not, most definitely not going to. This woman just had a fucking psychotic break, and it was bad.
I kind
It
of
was
thought they were gonna like
so
take one of the
fucking
kids
bad.
away or something.
Yeah, it was so fucking bad that she drove a car into a fucking river when she was like drunk, and this woman has 3 children, and like it's again, that's not quirky. That's fucking devastating. That's like in the wrong way. Like
I feel like they got the idea in their head for this twist, and they were more concerned with like, can we justify it like literally? Like, will it make sense logically in this movie? And like, I mean, obviously it's a bit of a stretch to have that, but I mean, they do sort of cover their tracks in that way. Like,
Right.
there is the whole thing where like Drew never comes down to meet
Yes.
the nanny, and that's like a thing that's like talked about. And then like in that scene you were talking about, when Drew was talking to Craig, Mark Duplass, and he's like, "Oh, did you call her? I didn't know that she called the nanny." When like she was supposed to go through Craig to.
who did
to
Marlo
contact.
call to?
I mean, she might not have called anybody.
Okay,
Who knows?
that's
I mean,
true. Maybe she
was
imagined, yeah.
insane. Like she imagined a lot of stuff. But like it covered its tracks nicely in that way. But like that's not what we were concerned about. Like I would much rather have a movie that like emotionally makes sense and stays true to itself rather than having to turn into Fight Club for moms.
So yeah, what I wanted to revisit is that maybe, moms, like some sort of organization for moms fighting for the recognition of postpartum depression, kind of. Them rallying against this film, I'm like, I don't see that big of a problem with it, because it's a very unrealistic, weird kind of film, kind of. And there's parts of me that's kind of like, listen, this film doesn't have to be about your cause, whatever, but also it has a weird fucking message. And it is almost kind of like, yeah, I think Charlize Theron has postpartum depression in some form of another. They never want to name it by its name, just like they kind of never want to name like his like autism on a spectrum by name, kind of. But it's kind of like, I don't know, it doesn't have to be the postpartum depression film, but somebody has to be like, it's not just exhaustion that's doing this. There's something that's I don't know.
It does fall
It's
into that weird category that
Yeah.
we've discussed many times before of like fetishizing like mental illness,
Right.
like, and just being like, oh, what's the now thing to talk about?
Like
and,
Fight Club, like Split, kind of. It's strange. When you start using a mental illness as a writing device, it's I don't know. I don't totally know where I land on that whole thing. But yeah, I'd love to know what you guys think.
let me read the Rotten Tomatoes and we'll get into some ratings. On review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 87% based on 165 reviews and an average rating of 7.8 out of 10. The website's critical consensus reads, Tully delves into the modern parenthood experience with an admirably deft blend of humor and raw honesty brought to life by an outstanding performance by Charlize Theron.
It is. It's a really great performance. The kids are really great too.
Everyone's pretty good in this.
I knew the minute he was like kicking the back of her chair, I was like, he's not being difficult. He's got something. Like he's got some sort of, I don't know. I was like, you know what? This isn't just he's not just being a brat. He is being quirky.
He's quirky.
He's being quirky, and that's a euphemism for special needs. It's kind of offensive when you think about it out loud. But yeah, again, the nautical themes kind of end up just being she also just imagines a mermaid as like a Tully as a mermaid saving her from the car underwater. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is this kind of like fantasy for like freedom, but it's also like escape. And then like in that moment, it's like escape from like parenthood and all that via drowning. It's just, I don't really, it's a weak image.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit the rest of the film.
Yeah.
Like they're literally using this like, you know, kind of like fantasy image going on.
Yeah.
That doesn't really fit with the rest of the movie. Sorry, I'm just setting us up to
No, that's fine.
capture our ratings.
Let's talk fingers though. I'll go first. Again, this movie was a short story that they tried to make a novel at the end. Like, you know, that's really the best way I can kind of explain it. Besides that, I feel like I've said everything I needed to say. I really love it's Reitman or Diablo Cody that kind of does like these. I liked it more in young adult where she's like periodically watching like the Kardashians kind of and like zoning out and like giving herself to that. Like I thought that was such like a great like thing to like revisit time and time again. It's just like human downtime in our time period basically. I wasn't as crazy about it in this one where it was like a reality show about like gigolos. I was kind of like, I guess that's funny. I was like, it's not as much what I thought.
I don't know if
the
it was supposed to be like
would be.
laugh out loud funny.
Oh, no,
as much
definitely.
it was
It was
just kind of like it was a vehicle for
Weird, absurd
to get comfortable with Tully, you know, because Tully's okay with it, and she's like,
Right.
oh yeah, like watch it, like you know, this only works if you're comfortable when I'm here.
But yeah, I feel like I have to land. Oh, I actually don't know.
I'm having a tough time too.
This is hard. Just because, I don't know, we're fucking almost halfway through this year. Even though our year ends in, like,
February
because of Oscars and everything. I don't know. I really enjoyed the beginning of this movie. Like you said, it could have been... We've seen a bunch of shitty movies this year so far, and this could have been the best movie that we've seen if it weren't for this ending. But the ending recontextualized the entire film, which is problematic. I think I'm just going to go with 3.5. 3.5 fingers out of 5.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm literally just going to repeat what you just said because that's exactly how I feel in terms of this movie was like cruising along. It was like my favorite movie of the year. I was just like picking out little parts that I loved about it. I was like thinking in my head like, this is like a 4.5 finger movie. Like I was like, man, this is just like, it's so good. I love this. I'm so enjoying watching this, and then it just kind of like takes this dark turn, and you're like, are you kidding me? Like, I feel like I'm the one having like the like hallucination here of what I'm seeing on screen. It's just so ridiculous. And it completely changes what you saw before. So I can't even view it through the lens of like, oh, I really liked the first half, but then the ending sucked, because the ending changes what the whole movie was.
Yeah, recontextualize the whole thing, yeah.
So I'm going to give it 3 fingers. It's an above average movie. It's a well-made movie.
Yes.
There's a lot that it does right in the making, but the screenwriting and the decisions that they made for these characters towards the end of the movie are just plain bad.
And it pains me that we have to give it like a score that's lesser than, I don't know. Jason Reitman, get your fucking shit together, man. Fucking,
I blame Diablo Cody.
no, exactly, but like, stop.
Like, why wouldn't he work with the person who, gave him films like
Juno,
or Young Adult? Like,
I don't know.
Anyway, so 3.5 and a 3. That's going to come to 3.25, which will round down to 3 fingers. So just slightly above average for us here for Tully. I don't think we had anything on the Facebook group about Tully. I don't think many people saw
Nobody,
Tully.
yeah. Nobody in our discussion group saw it. I don't know.
I can't quite recommend it anymore either.
I can't
after
either.
the ending.
The beginning is what a good movie looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Put that on the DVD box. The beginning is what a good movie looks like. But yeah.
So if you agree or disagree, leave a comment below on SoundCloud or YouTube, or you can hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, any of our social media. We'd love to hear from you. Definitely want to hear how you guys feel about this ending, if you can do it in a spoiler-free way, maybe.
Yeah.
Somehow, so we're not ruining it for even more people. And I'm sure Joe will cover anything else in the intro, so you can just check us out at howmanyfingerspodcast.com. Check out our review last week of Deadpool 2 with Hayden Samak, which we're going to go record right now. So hopefully it'll be good. We'll see you guys next week. Goodbye.